Welcome back to another episode of the Canon on the Boomer Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today going to be talking about James Gunn again, real quick. The gift that keeps on giving, but he didn't really necessarily do anything new. I just want to talk about how I feel about the whole situation so far. So, as we know, James Gunn and Peter Safran took over um, November 1st, and as the new DC Studios co-CEOs. And so since then, we know there's been a lot of news I should say the news first percolated out of Hollywood Reporter. And one thing I'll say, if you're a fan listening, please understand the difference between reports and announcements. We've rarely, outside of Comic-Con and other events, got announcements from studios. Most of the time, these are reports being put out by reporters. Sometimes really good places like Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, Entertainment Weekly, or Entertainment Tonight, whichever one it is, and they have trusted sources and a long history of being accurate, which is fine, but it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. And I say that because it reminds me of like Star Wars and I feel like DC, definitely not Marvel, maybe it was DC, but definitely Star Wars, where people kept complaining about Kathleen Kennedy and everything, saying how she is announcing all these movies and then they're not happening. And it's like some people have to say on their platforms, people I watch, they say, "Oh, walk it back. Kathleen never announced these. These are reports saying they heard that this is happening." And so people mix these things together all the time. So as this stuff is happening, please do not get caught up in a report saying this is what they've heard and this is what we're telling you versus a studio or a company actually announcing it. You got to know the difference between the two. Okay, so with that being said, though, this makes it even more interesting. You have James Gunn, who is very active on Twitter prior to this. And obviously, if you paid attention to him, you know he had a big dust up with Disney based over his old tweets because he's always been an active guy. And he said some things back then that weren't so cool. So anyway, that's where it kind of kicked off when he responded to the Hollywood Reporter's report. And so now that you have a direct line, not even I would say a direct line, you have the source. Outside of Peter Safran and David Zaslav, these are the sources. And so James Gunn himself telling you what is what for the most part while still kind of being vague. And so since then, we've seen a series of things. We've seen obviously coordinated announcements between him and Henry Cavill. He talked about his meeting with Ben Affleck. Ben didn't really follow up on that. Him and The Rock recently had their coordinated announcement and all that about what they made, as far as the decision going forward. And then you have him responding to fans. And so some people think it's cool. And I did think it was kind of cool at first, but I think now we're going over the line. And now that we've had time to really sit and see the trend, I really think he's mishandled this. And for whatever people want to say, there's a reason companies majority times handle it the same way. There's a reason why PR firms and consultants and agents, whoever, and even just the industry of PR is designed a certain way, and they've used certain principles because that's what works. That is what psychologically and just business structure wise, that's what works. These people know what they're doing. And so when you get even Warner Brothers with the Ezra Miller situation, this is the old regime, but even with that, when you get them and so many other people just not saying anything, that is a lot of times the right move, because the problem is if you say something and it's not clear enough, then you're just creating more speculation and questions. And that is what James Gunn is doing. Clearly, James Gunn is not ready to give you all the details. He's not even ready to give you he's not ready to give you a layout of what they're ready to do. And he said that they'll talk about a few projects. He said we want to tell you about our first few projects in the new year. And recently somebody else said how many projects, and he said a few again. And so we know that's coming. So they're not ready yet. And even when that happens, they're still not ready to tell you the big picture. And so if you're not ready to do those things, then you coming out with little bits and pieces of information, replying to people, is just causing more speculation. Like, especially with the Suicide Squad comment and the Rock's stuff. Again, I talked about that in my last episode. The Rock gave us a hint. I have a way that I see this happening, and not to say that's what's going to happen, but I have a way in my mind that I see it happening, and that's the same. One of the scenarios I talked about previously when he first took over, how they could go about it. And that's fine. That's the way I see it. I'm gonna wait for it to play out. But a lot of people, a lot of other YouTubers, a lot of other journalists and whatever, they don't see it the same way I do. They took it a different way, or they're confused by it, and now you're just creating more speculation, more confusion. And the confusion is just feeding into these toxic fans that are going crazy online. And to be honest, it's the Snyderverse fans. Not all of them, the toxic ones. The same ones, not the ones that started a chair. Like, everyone tries to use that as a blanket statement, as if everybody was a part of that. Just like everybody is not part of the toxic behavior, not everybody was part of the good behavior. So the toxic Snyderverse fans who aren't doing anything productive, who, hell, at the end of the day, might not even love the movies that much. They just want to be toxic people for all we know with the internet. But they're harassing people. They're sending death threats. They're starting hashtags to fire people. All that toxic stuff, you're giving them more ammo, because the amount of misinformation spreads so fast. And James Gunn has to know this. We all know this. I've seen personal friends who I know quoting misinformation just like it's fact, arguing with me. And I've seen it quoted so many times. The whole Suicide Squad thing, then he has to come back out and defend that. And again, that's why you just don't say nothing in most situations, because you're creating more issues. So again, you have The Rock say DC's multiverse chapters. Again, I have a way I think it works. I've always said my way for Marvel too going forward. If you're going to do multiverse again, you just started off every movie kind of a intro thing where whoever this all-knowing being is pulls open a book that's, or just looks at a map or whatever it is, just to, and it dives into that world. It's the same way, kind of like What If did, where it's just like it gives you a quick intro to know where on Earth whatever. And so maybe the Matt Reeves, the Batman, takes place in Earth 17 where there is no other heroes but him. Maybe the Joker takes place in Earth 30 where there is no Batman. It's just this Joker. And our main line maybe is Earth Prime, whatever. You could do that. And so I see it a way it can happen. But again, not everybody sees it that way. So some people look at that and now they're confused. They're saying, so is Black Adam going to be in his own universe? Is Henry Cavill now coming back? Like, how does this look? And then you say everyone is not true, that we're recasting everyone except the Suicide Squad. That's vague. That could mean that we know you're recasting some people, so it doesn't mean that no one's getting recast. It could mean that you're not recasting the Suicide Squad because you're not recasting some other people. It could mean a number of different things. So if you're going to continue to put information out and respond, but not do it in a clear way, you're just creating more speculation and more false rumors. So what is the point? At the top of it, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe to James Gunn, the point is just to be engaging. But to me, the point where it all started was for you to combat false narratives so that they don't get rolling. And so if that's the case, you're just creating more false narratives by not being clear. And then on top of that, if you wanted to get people excited by engaging with them, you're losing on that too, because they're just getting confused. And trust me, they are getting confused. Whether some people are purposefully spreading misinformation or people are just reading articles of reporters who are interpreting what you're saying, there's a lot of misinformation going on. The other thing is, this whole one by one thing makes it seem very unorganized to me. Like the Patty Jenkins thing, that happened. They didn't even really coordinate anything like that. He did come out after and say that, Wonder Woman 3 is not in their plans, whatever. But still, it was like, okay, that was kind of responding to a false narrative story that Patty responded to first. But then when you do the whole Henry Cavill thing, yeah, it was the same time. You do the whole Henry Cavill thing. You said that we met with Ben and we want to talk about directing. Then not too shortly after, we got The Rock. And then, some people ask a question about this and you say, well, no, that's not happening. When you keep letting it come out like that, it seems like you don't have control of the narrative. It seems unorganized. And it seems like you're kind of just doing it by the seat of your pants. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case. I believe it's a little bit of both going on. If I had to guess, for the quick turnaround, not only from being part of the process to being considered the top to offering and discussing to taking over November 1st till saying we're going to have meeting to go over the slate to saying in January, February, we're going to talk about new projects. That's a quick turnaround. So I have to believe there's a lot of moving parts. Some stuff planned, some stuff they're still figuring out, which is pretty much what James Gunn said. But just keep it under wraps. Like, again, it would be amazing for any of us invested in this to hear November 1st, James Gunn and Peter Safran take over. Hey, come into the room and see what they're talking about. Yes, any of us would love that. We would die for that. But that's not the case. While I would love that, I still said, okay, November 1st, let's see in July what they have got. Now that they had time to sit down and do all this stuff. But this timeline is so aggressively fast, and which is fine, but you did not have to get all this information out. I think you give yourself time not only to coordinate it, but then you give yourself time to make those final decisions. So to me, it made way more sense, especially if you're going to kick off a multiverse thing. And it's not like you had to get everybody together because obviously schedules are crazy. But talk to these people, ask them to go dark, not to go online talk about it. But tell them what you think and tell them we're moving forward, but we're going to have an arm of multiverse where you might be able to come back. We also have a way where in the main line you could play a different character. And so let's shoot an end credit scene. The Flash doesn't come out until the summer. Let's get together. Let's get some type of crazy end credit scene or whatever for Flashpoint that kicks us off into this multiverse, but we're focusing on a new Earth Prime. And that way, the fans of you get to see you one more time. They get to see the possibility of what the future holds. But also the bigger message is we were organized in this together. That's what should have happened. Like, you could talk about not caving to the fans and all that, and not saying they did, but I think part of that is let the fans be patient. You did not have to come out from November 1st. You didn't have to say a word until March. And nobody could hold that against you. Any logical person would not be able to hold that against you. And so I think in my mind, that's the way you would have handled it. But the way you're doing it now, again, makes it seem like it's kind of being made up on the spot. And that's not a good message for this new universe. And obviously, James Gunn not listening to this. And so James Gunn's going to do what he wants. And it seems like we're just going to keep this pattern up every week. There's something new, if not multiple, news throughout the week. And I don't think that's good for what they're building towards. And so again, like I've said many times, many examples, the best course of action is just not to say anything, because when you address certain rumors, you add fuel to the fire. I think Patty Jenkins, to me, is a instance where that made sense for her to address that, and to address it because it's a very clean cut thing. You're saying I walked away. That's not what happened. I was willing to rework and stay and do it. They told me it's not moving forward. That's clean cut. As something as complex as what James Gunn is doing, I think the more he puts this stuff out there, the more fuel he's adding to the fire. He's adding to the confusion. He's adding to the ill will of those toxic fans. And so that's my 2 cents. So that's it for me. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, if you heard it here, it's official canon.